So this is Travis. Travis is a bearded dragon. There's not much else to him, really. Well, I guess there's a couple things. I mean, as many of you probably do or don't know, bearded dragons, they come from the very dry deserts of Australia. And as such, they are avid consumers of Vegemite, aren't you, Travis? There are tons of different subspecies to bearded dragons, but the central bearded dragon is the most popular in the pet trade. On top of being one of the most popular and prolific animals in the pet trade overall, bearded dragons are priced accordingly. In fact, every bearded dragon that is sold in pet stores, expos, Craigslist, etc., wherever, they have an additional fee tacked on top of them to account for the lizard's popularity. You can look it up, or don't. I'm a credible source of information. Bearded dragons actually entered the pet trade in the 1990s, which is relatively recent. But I mean, in the grand scope of the reptile trade, isn't that recent? Considering that the reptile trade blew up sort of in the 80s. I guess that's one good thing that Reagan did, other than installing the United States' first ever gender-neutral bathroom. I guess if I personally were to get a bearded dragon, I'd probably get a leucistic one just because they look so weird and interesting and cool looking. Bearded dragons actually have a third eye, like right on top of their head. But instead of using it to try to manifest things, they use it for thermoregulation and hormone production. Basically as like a temperature gauge for them to understand and realize like, oh, I'm a little too hot, I want to cool down, or I'm a little too cold and I want to heat up. And despite their incredibly disarming appearance, bearded dragons are actually roped in with a lot of other species of lizards that in recent years have actually been discovered to be mildly venomous. In fact, I used to criticize the film adaptation of Holes for using bearded dragons as the venomous lizards, but I don't know, I guess they were kind of ahead of their time. Stanley Yelnats these nuts. And one thing that a lot of people sort of underestimate bearded dragons for is just how easily they do grasp class consciousness. It was actually a bearded dragon that pioneered and sort of authored Marx and Engels' concept of dialectical materialism. In fact, the Latin name for bearded dragon is proletariat vidiceps, which in Latin directly translates to jaws of the working class. The only thing that bearded dragons hate more than improper care is class struggle. Who would have thought? And also, because of these sort of prolific breeding programs and the fact that bearded dragons are so widely available, bearded dragons, they come in a huge variety of different flavors. You know, you can get hypo tangerine, citrus tiger, or brown. Bearded dragons have incredibly sensitive audio processing receptors, and there is evidence that certain bearded dragons have been known to alter their physical as well as neurological behavior based on hearing certain sounds. I actually am taking Travis to the vet after this video because I did catch him listening to Mitski the other day. I hope he pulls through. Stay strong, buddy. Bearded dragons are part of a larger family of lizards called agamas, which includes things like the toadhead agama, or painted agama, rainbow agama, etc., etc. I think once people realize that there are more lizards that act like bearded dragons and look kind of like bearded dragons but aren't bearded dragons, their time might be up. Imagine if painted agamas were as widely available as bearded dragons. People would probably love it. Bearded dragons can still remain at the top though, for now. In fact, one of the reasons for the bearded dragon's increase in popularity over other species of agamas is a lot of other agamas are not banned, but more so shadow banned from other countries, as in they're not shown quite as much because the tax laws in Australia are very, very lax and benefit bearded dragons quite a bit. They are actually wanted for tax evasion and tax fraud in numerous countries, but because of, some accounting tricks and that kind of stuff, bearded dragons ended up pushing the blame onto a lot of the other species of agama, just because clerically a lot of these governments, they have issues with their paperwork and that kind of stuff. Sticky notes were actually invented by bearded dragons. So because the Australian climate is very hot, it means that sun is pretty much always readily available for bearded dragons, and this overabundance of energy actually causes their fecal matter to be made out of shungite. Kind of interesting. It's also very annoying how smelly bearded dragons are. Smelly, stinky, stink boy. Like a lot of species of lizards, bearded dragons are omnivores, which means they can eat pretty much anything you give them, They can eat mostly anything that you could give an animal. Give them a healthy diet of worms, roaches, crickets, other invertebrates. But one thing that you can't give them is avocado. Bearded dragons and many other lizards actually find avocado incredibly poisonous and actually very toxic. That Charles Manson really did have some toxic vibes, huh? One of the most underestimated and, in my opinion, coolest things about bearded dragons is the fact that they're actually, contrary to popular belief, they're lizards. Also, fun fact about the channel, 30% of my viewers are actually bearded dragons and 100% of them are not subscribed. So don't be like them. Lizards are just so tight.